Welcome to Worthy Ones, the video series where I take all the newest issue 1 comic books that I read for the current comic book week and deem them worthy or not worthy. I'm Mike Spider Slayer. Welcome back to Comic Book Corner 2.0. If you love daily comic book content, if you love me helping you make decisions on what comic books to buy, guys, you came to the right place. Why don't you consider hitting that subscribe button? Alright, so before we dive into it, I know a lot of you guys ask about t-shirts, where I get them, and you might want to ask about this particular one because Deadpool Wolverine movie is right around the corner. And yes, guys, I picked this shirt up at Universal Studios. They have a comic shop there, and I saw this shirt, and it's the only place I've seen it so far, and I was like, man, I knew I had to get this. Now, not only is there a front, right, but then there's also a back, and let me see if I can turn around and share it with you here so you can see it. Hopefully you guys can see it. So if you're interested in this type of shirt, I'm going to see if I can find a link, or maybe YouTube has this shopping thing where I can give you a link and click to buy it or whatever it is. And maybe you guys can get a shirt so you can wear it to the Deadpool Wolverine movie. But I saw this and I was like, yes. So hopefully you guys can get one. All right. So with that being said, let's go ahead. Let's get started with this week's episode. The Domain. This is issue 1. This book is 20 pages for the price of $4, written by Chip Zdarsky, and the art is done by Rachel Stott. Now, I think this is connected to the Public Domain, which is a series that he wrote in the past, but I didn't feel like you needed to read that to understand what was happening here. Maybe it's all the world that's going to connect, and this was pretty much a very simplistic superhero storytelling, like origin story of characters that get powers, right? The artwork was okay in this book, and this just reminds me of just a very simple comic book. Like, there was like large font, lettering, simplistic layouts when it comes to like the paneling, and again, just your average storytelling of how people wind up getting superpowers. And so you get introduced to like 3 main characters who were like bullied back in 2018, and they kind of form their own little space group, and they analyze the stars, and they go chasing after rocks that are falling from the sky, and they come across the UFO and they see aliens, and the next thing you see is somehow they acquire powers from these aliens, right? And then they're holding a secret that they discover from this alien spacecraft. So whether they should have, given this up to the police or whoever, or keep these aliens secret, that's going to be their decision at the end. But this was not a bad comic book, so I'm going to say that this book is worthy. I think if this is a story that, you're looking to jump on, I think you could easily understand it. If you're getting into independent comics for the first time, you might want to check this out because you got a solid writer with Chip Zdarsky writing it, and it's fine. However, for me, I'm not going to be continuing it. It's just something that I don't think I will really miss, because there's so many other comics out there. But it wasn't a bad tale, so I'm going to give this one an average C. It was just okay for me. It's just something that personally I would not continue going forward. But if you're looking for something independent and you're looking for a decent writer, check it out. See what you think of it. Kid Venom. This is issue 1 for the price of $5. This was a 28-page comic. A writer and artist here is Tamagami. The artwork is what you can expect when it comes to a manga-inspired comic book. This might have a similar vibe for you, like Ultimate X-Men, right? I love the lettering in here. This looks great. The artwork looks great. The symbiotes are called like Onis in this series. But for me, this book is not worthy. This is something that's not up my speed. And I said this about another book recently about that old Japan culture. I can't quite get into it. I can't get into the tribes. it's just not my thing. I'm not saying that this is a bad comic book. I think I'm going to give it a lot of credit for doing something different and kind of thinking a little bit outside the box and going to something that's more mainstream these days, which is manga. And a lot of people read manga. So I could see a lot of people maybe picking this comic book up and going, oh, wow, this is actually kind of cool. And how does Spider-Man tie into all of this, right? So, again, this is not my cup of tea, but I'm going to recognize it for being different, and I can truly see why people might like this. So I'm going to grade this actually a B. It's just not my thing. I have done this before where I have said, for me, a book is not worthy, but for other people, it might be. And again, I give it credit for, being different. Hulk Blood Hunt. This is issue 1, a 36-page comic for the price of $5. This one is written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, and the art is done by Danny Earls. It definitely has that dark tone. It has that horrific feel to it, where you have the vampires. And you know what? This doesn't even feel like a tie-in. This is just what you could expect from Philip Kennedy Johnson's run, right? So when I read this, I was like, oh, it's just another issue of Hulk. That's what it feels like. Because you could totally see him writing this and putting it in his story, where Bruce Banner has to go through this town and he comes across this guy who's telling him this story about his parents who became vampires, and he actually told his parents to come here to take down the Hulk. That's basically what this story is. You get a crazy transformation with the Hulk and stuff like that, and it even ties into the main book, because there is a mention of Charlie here, as she is still that porcelain doll, and he's trying to, solve that curse, right? So I thought for a Hulk book, this book was worthy. It was fine. It's just like the regular series. It's almost like, okay, probably the best Blood Hunt tie-in there is, because you naturally tied in vampires to this, right? And it's just kind of like the little side journey that Hulk goes on while he's going to, I think, Las Vegas, right? So not a bad book. I'm going to give this one a B-. It was just a fun, means nothing type of read. Absolute Power Task Force 7. This is issue 1, a 32-page comic for the price of $4. Before I bought this book, I didn't realize that Leah Williams was writing this issue. Then I did a little bit more research, and I found out that I think there's going to be different writers on each individual issue going forward. So that is a huge plus, because I'm not always a fan of Leah Williams writing. Now, the art is done by Caitlin Yarsky, and the art was a disappointment for me in this comic book, because after seeing Dan Mora's artwork, right, on Absolute Power, you kind of almost expect a complimentary artist, because there was a lot at stake in that first issue of Absolute Power. And here we wind up getting to see Billy and Mary wind up being tracked down by an Amazon robot, and you don't feel like there's a lot at stake, even though maybe there is. It just seems very kiddish-like, where they're being chased down by the robot, they're making jokes. It almost feels like when you read this, it's like a freaking kid's comic. Like, you got the dinosaur in there. It's just, I don't know, man. You got Shazam in here, who is a very, intense guy. Intense hero or anti-hero, and this is the way he looks. Like, I don't know, man, I could not take this book seriously. So for me, after reading this first issue, I didn't think it was worthy. It's not worthy for me, right? But does it mean that I'm not going to continue? I am going to continue, because we're going to get a different writer. And in fact, the next writer that's going to be on issue 2 here is going to be John Layman, and the art is going to be Max Raynor. So I think we could have an improved issue here. So if I had to grade this particular one, I'm going to give this one a D. Just does not complement Absolute Power issue 1 very well. It's that one had great artwork, solid storytelling, and here it was just a miss. From the DC Vaults, Death in the Family, Robin Lives. This is issue 1. Probably a story a little bit overdue, right? Just to see like what would happen if, you know, Jason never died and he just stayed Robin, right? This one's 32 pages for the price of $5. Now, when it comes to this book, the artwork is done by Rick Leonardi, and the writer here is J.M. DeMatteis. So if you're a fan of J.M. DeMatteis, I think you're going to really like this book. The artwork definitely has that old school style. Even when you pick up and read this book, it has pages like the days from the 80s, right? It feels like newspaper print. The guys are kind of hard. The characters are kind of hard to see their facial expressions at time because it tries to mimic like, you know, old newspaper print, like I said already. Really cool looking book. It's cool to see all the different characters in here back in like 1988 style, right? So what did this book have to offer? Well, it kind of shows you what happens to Joker after the whole incident, the whole Jason Todd incident. And I'm not going to give that away, but what this book really captures is the trauma that Jason goes through after his whole ordeal with the Joker, okay? And obviously what Batman goes through and how he's trying to help Jason and how Alfred is trying to help Jason. And Jason is kind of blaming, you know, everyone else, and obviously no one else understands what he's going through. He wants to be by himself. Bruce calls in Dick to kind of aid him through, and you really get to see that struggle with Bruce. And I like to see how much he cared for his son, right? And we get to see Jason go out on his own as Robin and try to take on the Scarecrow, and it was kind of really sad what happens here by the time you wind up getting to the end of this book. This is a must-read book. This is a worthy comic book. I'm going to give this one a solid A. This was awesome read. Read like an old-style Batman book, old-style comic book. Old school fans, I think, are going to really like it. You know, for me, I thought the artwork could have been a little bit better, but it was a fun read. Definitely a recommend. This might be my sleeper pick of the week. Here we go. Kill All Immortals. This is issue 1. This is a 28-page comic for the price of $4. Our writer here is Zach Kaplan. Our art is done by Fico Ozio. This book can be pretty bloody, pretty gory at times. The characters look great. Check out that facial expression right there. And we have our main character who is her name is Frey. Okay? And she is loaded. She is like a billionaire, billion times over. She comes from a family that has tons of money. And what this comic does is it doesn't give you who she is, what she's about at all until the very end of the comic. And at first, this was kind of like a deterrent for me. I'm like, we're kind of jumping all over the place. She's got this random boyfriend. You constantly telling me that everything is a secret. Like, I was getting frustrated in the beginning. And actually, like I said, this could be a turnoff for readers and they might not finish it. So I'm telling you now, if you're thinking about picking it up, or you're like, okay, I read 8 pages and it's not going anywhere, it's jumping all over the place, read it through the end, okay? So we get to know Frey. We find out that she has a lot of money. She donates. She does all these charity events. She has this boyfriend. And then all of a sudden, she winds up getting ambushed by these people, right? And so all of a sudden, she feels like she's in danger. And she has to go home to that family. And she has to bring her boyfriend because her family is like, has all kinds of history attached to him. And she tries to remove herself from there. And her family is from Iceland, okay? So now once you get to Iceland, you start learning about her siblings, her father, you know, they have a dinner. And let's just say like this dinner goes south real fast. And when you talk about gory, it gets pretty gory, pretty bloody, really quick right after this page right here. And you find out what this chick is all about in the next 2 pages, and it's a great cliffhanger to make you buy issue 2. This book is worthy. I definitely say pick this one up. It's not a perfect first issue, okay? Because it takes a little while to get to where it needs to get to, but it's definitely a great cliffhanger, and I can't wait to see the direction that this comic goes. I'm going to give this one an A-. I love when you get new independent books that hook a reader for issue 2, 3, and 4. And the cool thing about this one, it's a Dark Horse book. I don't read that many Dark Horse books, but I put this one on my pull list as soon as I read it. X-Men, this is issue 1. It's finally arrived. This is legacy numbering 301, 40 pages, $6, written by Jed MacKay and drawn by Ryan Stegman. A lot of you guys love Stegman's artwork because he's done so much work on the Spider-Man books. He's done work on Uncanny Avengers and countless other projects. So people were very interested to see what the art is going to be like in the pages of the X-Men comic. Now, I think in the beginning, when you go from one art change to another, it's gonna take some time for you to get adjusted to the artwork. I thought overall the artwork was decent in this comic, but not his best work. Some of the characters looked a little smaller than what I'm used to, and maybe a little kiddish-like. So here, like Cyclops, he looks super young. But when you go into a couple of pages later on, when they're busting through the doors of this place that they're trying to infiltrate, he looks much older. So for instance here, he looks better here, right? And Beast was probably the character that I had the most problem with here because he's very big and bulky, but he's got this small head and he's got this always these lazy looking eyes. In fact, there's a few characters in here that kind of look like they're either overtired, they need to get some sleep, or they look stoned. So that was kind of the issue that I had with the artwork. So this page is actually good, okay? I thought the colors were great. I thought they were bright and vibrant. Some of the other characters look nice in this comic, and you get introduced to quite a few of them here. And there's a lot that goes on in this comic book, but if you want to jump on X-Men, this is the time that you gotta do it. Otherwise, you might get lost because there is a lot that happens in here. And I gotta give Jed MacKay credit because I think this is the hardest time. You're going from one era to the next. You're ending one, you're still tying loose ends for one, and you're going into the next one, okay? So what this comic has to offer is you get to see the different base of operations for this X-Men team. And it's being, I guess, shown by Beast to this sheriff, how this was an old factory that was producing Sentinels. Now, it created a lot of jobs in the area, even though it wasn't the best, it did. And this sheriff has concerns about the X-Men occupying this space, but Beast promises him that this is going to be for the better, right? So everybody knows that Orcus was bad and all this other stuff, and so he's trying to convince him of that. Meanwhile, we get to introduce to the cast of characters that are in this comic book, like Cyclops, Juggernaut, Quentin Quire, Magic, Psylocke, Temper. You know, you see all these guys go out into a mission, and they're trying to not only get Wolverine back because he's been like captured or whatever, but they've discovered 6 new mutants in here. And in this comic book, usually mutants tend to be kids or kids going through puberty. In this case, it's something different. You also get the mumbo jumbo of like this 4th generation of like Orcus people compared to the 3rd people. And so you just got all these little different story threads going along. And I feel like it could be a little bit overwhelming for readers because, again, you're dealing with Krakoa, you're introduced to the team, you're introduced to the leader, you're introduced to the base of operations, you're introduced to all this stuff going on. So that's why I say if you're gonna jump on it now, do it now, okay? Because I feel like you'll understand more as time goes along. For me, this comic book was worthy. Do I think this was the perfect number one? No, I don't. I think it was a little bit all over the place. I think the art was a little bit inconsistent, and I think some people could get turned off by this. So for me, I'm going to give this one actually a C+. And I think that this one is probably going to get better as it goes along. It just needs time to flesh out. So there you have it on X-Men. I want to know in the comments below what you thought of it. So there you have it, guys. There are my thoughts on the newest issue ones for the current comic book week. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I know some things I said were worthy and not worthy, and they got good grades and bad grades. But again, some things could be worthy. Some things could not be worthy, but they still could be good, right? So that's just the way it goes sometimes. So guys, if you love the content, more content right here for you to click on. And of course, guys, support the local comic shops. Keep buying, keep collecting, but always remember, read those comic books so we can have great comic conversation. Guys, thank you so much.